I talked with Marty Lurie from San Francisco Giant Radio, pre-game and post-game, about 20 years. This man is a great human being and a man with historian of the baseball, special San Francisco Giant. Mary, tell me something about the San Francisco Giants early days, first year in '58.
Well, it was a very important year because they had come from New York. So Willie Mays was the one they all talked about. But Willie Mays was a New Yorker. So the San Francisco Giants, the fans wanted San Francisco new players. And the first new player they had was Orlando Cepeda. And he made the team in 1958, and he was a first baseman on opening day. Second at bat, he hit a home run off of Don Besant of the Dodgers, and the Giants went on to win the game 8-0. Ruben Gomez pitched a shutout that day. So
This is the first game in the
first
West
game,
Coast.
April 15th, 1958. So Orlando became a hero right away. He was a tremendous player. He could run. He could steal bases. He had doubles. He had home runs, RBIs, 300 batting average, and he was a unanimous Rookie of the Year. He was a tremendous player. So Orlando became the star with Willie Mays, but people really liked Orlando. And then they had Jim Davenport, who was the third baseman, a young player as well. So they tried to get more of the young players in, and then the next year, Willie McCovey came up. So the problem was that they had two first basemen, Orlando Cepeda and Willie McCovey. So McCovey couldn't play anywhere else. And Orlando was such a good athlete, they put him at third base, which really wasn't his position. Then the next year they put him in left field. But Orlando kept hitting because he was a hitter and he could run. His knees were good. And then McCovey had trouble in 1960, and he went back to the minor leagues, and Orlando went back to first base. Then you look at his numbers for 1960, 61, and 62. Tremendous seasons. And Orlando in 1962 was one of the big stars of the team, and the big moment.
This year is the year when Orlando probably won the MVP.
Should have, but
the MVP.
Maury Wills, because Maury Wills stole 104 bases. And that's when he got the MVP in 1962.
And this and the baseball in this era, a guy's stolen base won the MVP.
Yeah, because the stolen base had come back. Luis Aparicio from Venezuela was the king of the American League, and in the National League it was Maury Wills, and he broke Ty Cobb's record. It was 96 in 1 year. Maury Wills stole 104. So that's how he broke the record. But Orlando, the best moment for Orlando, the most respect he got, was in the World Series. Because in Game 7 against the New York Yankees in San Francisco, the Giants are losing 1-0. And it's the bottom of the ninth inning. And with two out, Matty Alou gets on, and Mays hits a double. Now it's second and third. Two out, a right-handed pitcher, Ralph Terry, is pitching. And McCovey came up, and Cepeda was on deck. So Ralph Houck, the manager of the Yankees, went out to the mound, and Cepeda will tell you, he thought they were going to walk McCovey to load the bases and have Terry pitch to Cepeda. Well, they didn't want to pitch to Cepeda, even with the bases loaded. So they pitched to McCovey, and McCovey hit a line drive to Bobby Richardson for the last out of the World Series in 1962 with Cepeda on deck. Every other manager, conventional wisdom said you put McCovey on, you set up the force, and you pitch to Cepeda. But Cepeda could hit Ralph Terry, and Ralph Terry knew it. And Cepeda always told me, he says, I knew if they pitched to me, I would win the World Series. So he never had that chance. And that was 1962. Then he went on, he got hurt, his knees were not good, And he didn't get along as well with Herman Franks and Alvin Dark. Alvin Dark had problems with the Latin players. He wanted everyone to speak English, and they was not going to happen in the clubhouse. So Cepeda and Felipe Alou were outspoken at that time. Felipe Alou was a great leader from the Dominican Republic. He was the man who wanted the Latin Bill of Rights.
Yes.
So Cepeda hurt his knee, and then in 1966, he came back and played a little bit, but the middle of the year, in 1966, the Giants were in St. Louis, and Herman Franks was the manager, and they traded Orlando Cepeda to the St. Louis Cardinals in 1966. He went to the Cardinals. Tim McCarver, Lou Brock, they were so happy. They were so happy to get him. Kurt Flood was there as well. So Orlando became the first baseman. In 1967, they won the World Series, and he's the unanimous MVP. And that people knew how good he was and what a great player he was.
And you saw Orlando in San Francisco play, and in those 5, 6, or 7 years, what player in this era, and the era of the first 5 or 6, 7 years of Orlando Cepeda compared to Orlando Cepeda, because the number of Orlando Cepeda in these first years, so tremendous number, tremendous start.
Outstanding. Frank Robinson, Clemente, Hank Aaron. Absolutely, those players were very similar to Orlando. Those were the All-Stars. In the All-Star game in 1964 at Shea Stadium, Dick Raddatz, the big monster, was pitching for the American League. Orlando got the big hit to tie the game in that All-Star game, and then Johnny Callison hit a 3-run homer to win the game. Orlando was a star. Orlando was a star. You had Mays, you had Aaron, you had Robinson, you had Clemente, and you had Cepeda. And that was the National League. That's why the National League won all the All-Star games in those days.
And in the 60s, in the first decade of Orlando Cepeda play full in USA, Clemente and all those players. What you tell me about the pitching in National League? Freisel, Koufax, Gibson.
It was the
Perry.
the best 10 years of National League pitching ever. Every team had stars, whether it was Vernon Law, Bob Friend, Joey Jay, Bob Perky, Koufax, Drysdale, Padres, Don Sutton, Marichal, Gaylord Perry. The Cardinals had Gibson, had Nelson Bryles, had Washburn. The Cubs had Kenny Holtzman, Ferguson Jenkins, Dick Drott. The Houston Astros had Larry Durker, Don Wilson, people like that. The Mets had Tom Seaver, Jerry Kuzman, people like that. Every team, you could go down every single team. Phillies had Jim Bunning, Chris Short. Every team had 2 or 3 pitchers that anytime you saw them, you'd say they would be all-stars. It was the best 10 years of pitching ever in the National League, and Orlando was one of the best hitters against those pitchers during that 10-year period. He went from St. Louis to Atlanta with Rico Carty and Hank Aaron, and great hitters there, and there was Orlando.
And in the National Hall of Fame, it's about 41 players. Was he played in All-Star games in the 60 decade of 60? This is the greatest, one of the greatest ever decade in baseball?
No question.
42, 41 players in Hall of Fame.
No question, because by this point, the National League had Latin players, they had players of color, and they were maturing as players. And the American League was very slow to integrate and bring in more players of color. And so the National League was at the forefront. Now, in the 60s, these men had become seasoned players. They were ready to be stars because they came up in 55, 56, 58. So 10 years later, 10-year veterans or 8-year veterans or 12-year veterans. Hank Aaron, they were big stars at this point. And still, with the white players, they made teams, and the strength of all the players, not just white players, not just Latin players, but all the players together, made these teams tremendous. But the National League was ahead of the American League. That's why the National League dominated that decade.
Thank you, Marty. It's a pleasure for me and for people of Puerto Rico about talking about with you with baseball.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest, Orlando Cepeda, Roberto Clemente, and other players.
Tremendous players, tremendous. And they played in the Puerto Rican Winter League. The managers, Herman Franks was there, Frank Robinson was there. The Puerto Rican Winter League
Sparky Anderson.
It was huge, huge. And Clemente, the great Deacon Jones, the left-handed hitter, is a tremendous hitter, and he hurt his shoulder, and Clemente took him to his place to rub something on his shoulder. It was the hottest thing he ever felt in his life.
Yeah.
But they loved the Winter League, and they loved playing there, and it was good baseball.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice.
Good. That's good.